Alright, got to do some measurements on the piston rings. You have to make sure you have your piston rings for each one. We're going to measure side clearance here. I've got the top ring here, so I'm going to take the ring and I'm going to slide it in that way. Okay. And then I'm going to take my feeler gauge and I'm going to open up this feeler gauge to the smallest feeler gauge I've got. In fact, I'm going to take the smallest 3 or 4, maybe up to 6 thousandths out of this feeler gauge so that they're sticking out for me. Okay. So now what I can do is take my feeler gauge and I'm going to go gradually one at a time, and I'm going to take that ring, that feeler gauge, and set it in there and see what the measure the clearance between the ring land, which is the groove in the piston, okay, and the side of the piston, or piston ring. So now I am measuring that gap. How much room do I have? How much extra space do I have on this piston ring in that ring land? And that 1.5 thousandths fits in there very nicely. Okay, I don't know if you can even see that on the feeler gauge. Okay, so I got 1.5 thousandths on the top one. Now I take my second compression ring, do the same thing. All right, and boy, that one's a real nice 1.5 thousandths too. Sometimes you'll have a condition where the smallest feeler gauge you got in our required toolkit is 1.5 thousandths or 15/10 thousandths of an inch. If it's less than that, if you feel, oh boy, I almost got to force it in there, then just write down on your paperwork that it's less than 10 thousandths of an inch, and that'll work for your instructor. Okay. Now the next thing we got to do is we got to measure the side clearance on the oil ring. Now in order to do that, we got to assemble an oil ring, and I don't have it in this piston ring, but we can do it in this piston right now, but we can do that real quickly. Again, 3 o'clock and 7 and 10 as viewed from the top. We'll slip it in there. Again, the ring should move freely in the ring land. And then we're going to take our feeler gauge. Now the oil rail is going to have a lot more slop in it than the compression rings. So now this is where you're going to need those bigger, thicker feeler gauges. So I'm going to go up to a 3, and that 3 feels really tight in there. So I'm going to go down to a 2 and see what the 2 does. That 2 is nice in there. Okay. Now that's side clearance, folks. Side clearance on a piston ring. This is important because if the rings start doing too much moving up and down, it tends to pump oil up to our combustion chamber, and it'll become an oil consumer. That's why we always check side clearance. Okay? All right, well that's all there is to it to side clearance.